On today's show, what's the rotation for the Cavs going to look like, both when they're fully healthy and, as we know they will be to start the season, not fully healthy? We'll discuss that, plus training camp back on the road. That's all straight ahead on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham, and you might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers at places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. And I just want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend, tell a friend about the show, make sure you are subscribed, and make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Last week, went over what I think the starting five should be. We talked in depth about the impact that Max Strus' injury will have on the starting lineup, but as a little bit of an exercise today, I wanted to go through what I think the full rotation for Kenny Atkinson and the Cleveland Cavaliers should be, both at the start of the season when they are not going to be fully healthy. We don't know whether or not Darius Garland is going to be playing at the beginning of the season. The timeline the Cavs gave when he had foot surgery would lead me to believe he's not, but I think we will be getting more information about that later on this month as the team does convene for training camp. We'll talk a little bit about that coming up later on in the show as well. But I wanted to go through what I think the healthy rotation for the Cavs should be. And of course, there's no guarantee, as we know, that the Cavs will be completely, fully, 100% healthy all at the same time. Last year, the Cavs did not have a game in which they had all of their rotation players available to them until the month of January. It was the game in Oklahoma City where it was like 2 weeks after what was the game of the year. The game of the year, I believe, was January 8th when OKC visited the Cavs. And then January 16th, the Cavs go to OKC and just get absolutely rocked. They lost 134-114 in a game where I believe they trailed by 40 plus at certain points. But that game on January 16th last year was the very first time that everybody in the rotation was available for the Cavs. And it led to some decisions that Kenny Atkinson had to make. Like, the one thing I remember about that, Sam Merrill was kind of the guy that was the odd man out. Of course, it wouldn't stay like that. And I believe Isaac Okoro exited because of an injury very shortly thereafter. But that was the first time. So it probably won't be very frequent, if at all, this year, where the Cavs are fully, completely, 100% healthy all at the same time. It just is, unfortunately, a rarity in the NBA, whether it's for load management or legitimate injuries, the way that Max Strus and Darius Garland are dealing with right now. That's kind of how it goes. So I do think the exercise of having what everything looks like, if it is perfect, if everyone's available, is worth doing, because in an ideal world, that's what you're looking at. But I also think that doing this exercise, knowing that guys are going to miss time and sort of where people fall into this list, I think might be the more important exercise to be done. And if you missed yesterday's show, I would recommend go back and listening to that one, maybe even before listening to the rest of this episode, just because I do think it matters as far as which guys are more important than other ones. And I went through and I ranked the roster basically 1 through 13 as far as importance goes for the 2025-2026 Cleveland Cavaliers, because I think a lot of that discussion kind of shapes this exercise. So as I mentioned, if you listened to last week at all, where I talked a lot about the starting lineup, and with Max now out for the first couple of months at least of the season, I think it is fair to start with what do things look like at the start if they're not healthy. So I've built this rotation under the assumption that Max Strus will not be available, which is not an assumption. We know he's not going to be available on opening night. Also under the assumption that Darius Garland will not be available. I'll have one without Strus, with Garland coming up in a bit, as well as a fully healthy one. But if this were to be the case, I think that the starting five has 4 guys in it that you should be able to bank on being in it. I think it's Donovan Mitchell, obviously, Evan Mobley, obviously, Jared Allen, obviously. And then I do think DeAndre Hunter should be a starter. And I covered that in depth last week. If you want more on that, you can go back and listen to that. I don't necessarily want to get too deep into that just because I think, especially with Max out, with Darius out, that makes a lot of sense. And then the other discussion that I think is interesting is who should be that 5th starter? Who should be that other backcourt player? I certainly could be sold on Lonzo Ball being the starting point guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers at the beginning of the season. I think in a perfect world, if you didn't have to worry about Lonzo as a injury risk, but unfortunately you do, but if you did not need to worry about that, I think he'd be a great fit next to this starting 5. I actually think that would be one of the best 5-man units that the Cavs could build when you do have to include the bench. Other than the starting 5, I think having Lonzo in there would give them a boost. What he's able to do defensively, how much pressure he can take off of Donovan Mitchell in the backcourt, I think is a very good thing. The fact that he's such a willing passer, sure, he's maybe not as great at getting to the basket and not the best 3-point shooter in the world. He's a solid 3-point shooter, not just, he's not an elite guy from out there. And then defensively being a very good player as well. I look at that and say he's somebody that could raise the floor of that lineup when you do have bench units in there. Now, the reason why I don't think it's some surefire thing that he starts is I don't know that you can count on Lonzo Ball being in the lineup every single night. And I will talk about this a little bit later on this week because there's a mailbag question that has been asked about it that I'm going to get to in Friday's show. But with Lonzo, they need to take a long view with him because what Lonzo gives them in October, November, December, it is important, but it's not vital. Like their season does not hinge on whether or not Lonzo Ball can play 35 minutes on a game in early December. That truthfully is not all that important for where this team wants to go. What is important is that when the playoffs roll around, if Darius Garland is maybe in foul trouble, can Lonzo Ball play 25 minutes in a playoff game? That is the thing that matters to the Cavs. That is the thing that matters to their championship hopes. If he can do that, they're going to be in a really good spot because of how impactful he is. So I look at this and say, okay, I don't know if he should be the starter because I do think that with guys being out of the lineup, you do want to try and have as much continuity as you possibly can. That would be a good thing to be able to have because you don't want to have, and the Cavs are going to, this is not breaking news here. They're going to cycle through several different starting lineups throughout the year with guys in and out. That's not some surprise, right? Like at some point, Darius Garland will be a starter for the Cavs. At some point, Max Strus will probably have to start a game for the Cavs. Like there's going to be different guys that are thrust into the starting lineup at different points. Now, the thing that I wonder about is Lonzo Ball going to play back-to-backs during the regular season? My inclination would be no, that he's not. And again, we don't know when Darius Garland's going to be back. Maybe he is ready to start the season, but I would guess that he's not going to be. Well, the Cavs don't wait until Darius Garland is back to have back-to-backs on the schedule. They have one in the very first week. So do you want to, if you're Kenny Atkinson, maybe not have Lonzo Ball available on Sunday, October 26th against the Milwaukee Bucks so that he can play Monday, October 27th against the Detroit Pistons? Because I would assume that playing him on both ends is probably not something that makes a ton of sense in October when you do want to take a long-term view on things. The Cavs before Darius, let's take a conservative approach here. Let's say Darius Garland doesn't get back until Thanksgiving, which would be Thursday, November 27th. I would bet that he is back before then, but let's just take a very conservative approach here. So before November 27th, the Cavs do have several back-to-backs, and that's something that matters here. They've got that one that I mentioned the first week of the season. They've got another one, a Friday, November 7th, and Saturday, November 8th, Washington, Chicago, Wednesday, November 11th, Thursday, November 13th, Sunday, November 23rd, Monday, November 24th. So you are looking at this as, okay, the Cavs are going to, because of that, have to cycle through several different starting lineups, provided that everyone else stays healthy. And I just think that if you're the Cavs, if you can avoid needing to make those little micro changes night in and night out. And of course, the rotation is going to change to some extent when guys are out no matter what. But I think if you can keep some continuity in the starting five, it would be a good course of action. So because of that, I think Sam Merrill should get that fifth starting spot. And then I look at the bench bunch for when the Cavs are not healthy. Larry Nance Jr., going to be a rotational player. I think that if he can play somewhere between 12 and 17 minutes a night, that's a really healthy place for the Cavs to be in. And one of the things, and I've talked about this pretty frequently when Larry has come up on this podcast, one of the things that is very important is he can play the 4 and the 5. Having a legitimate backup big that, yes, like Lonzo Ball, does have injury risks, but having somebody like him that can play alongside both Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, I think is a very, very good thing. So then that leads us to Lonzo Ball, who I touched upon a lot, but I do think that he'll be a very, very good reserve point guard. What he can do with some bench units, I think will be really, really great. Dean Wade is somebody that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on this week. I think Dean is in a very interesting spot. He's obviously a rotation level player. I do think he needs to be more aggressive offensively. And then I look at the 9th guy in this rotation, and it's Jaylon Tyson right off the rip. Like, I do think that we should expect Jaylon Tyson to be in the rotation at the start of the season. With Max Strus out, he is somebody that I don't think needs to fight for a spot in the rotation. I think he's probably fighting to be the 8th guy, maybe pushing Dean Wade down, or maybe the 7th guy, depending on how you view Larry. I just think because those roles are so different, that's kind of a different discussion. But can he be that second wing, the first wing off the bench, really? Because the way you're going to view Lonzo Ball is as a backcourt player, Sam Merrill is a backcourt player if he's not starting. So if you look at this, okay, Larry Nance, the first big off the bench, Sam Merrill or Lonzo Ball, whichever one doesn't start, is the first guard off the bench. Can Jaylon Tyson be the first wing off the bench for the first few months of the season? I think that's a really good goal for him to have. Now, that would mean he has a better camp than Dean Wade, which I don't think is a crazy thing. Like that, maybe we shouldn't expect it, but it wouldn't be crazy if that happened. I don't think anybody would be stunned by that. So I do think if we look at it this way, okay, that's kind of your 9-man rotation. And Kenny Atkinson does like to have a little bit of a deeper bench. Maybe this means some Craig Porter Jr. Maybe. And we have no idea what he's going to be as an NBA player. Maybe this means a little bit of Tyrese Proctor. But ultimately, I think that 9 to 10 guys is where Kenny Atkinson is going to want to be as far as the rotation goes at all times, because the one thing that I do think they did very well last year, and I think they will try and mimic this year, is keeping minutes low. And I think as you do that, you know, if you can count on Larry Nance Jr. playing between 12 and 17 minutes, Sam Merrill is probably going to be between 18 and 22 minutes. I think Dean Wade is probably going to be between 12 and 17. Jaylon Tyson, probably a little bit more because of what he can bring. I do think that the Cavs can go 9 or 10 deep, even if guys like Max Strus and Darius Garland are not available. That's how I expect things to start this season. Now, let's say the Cavs are fully healthy at any point this year. What's the rotation look like then? We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel. NFL season almost here. So close, you can taste it. It's right here. Tomorrow, in fact. And FanDuel, making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer, because right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus. With $300, did not stutter there. $300 in bonus bets. If that first $5 bet wins, those dollars in bonus bets that you can use all across the app. Maybe you've got a divisional long shot like the Cleveland Browns. I would advise against it. The Browns probably not going to win the AFC North, but a team like the Baltimore Ravens, unfortunately, might. A team like the Pittsburgh, I'm not going to go there. The Cincinnati Bengals, they could win the AFC North. You can get the best odds over at FanDuel. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com, FanDuel.com to get started. Place your first $5 bet. Again, new customers, place just $5 on your first bet. And if it wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. And I am going to have a mailbag episode coming up on Friday. So if you've got questions for me for Friday, drop them in the comments. I've got enough for a show right now, but if there's better questions, some other ones might get the boot. So leave your questions for Friday's mailbag show in the YouTube comments, or you can tweet them at me at Real D Cunningham on Twitter, or send them via email, locavsmailbag@gmail.com. So the Cavs are not going to be fully healthy to start the season. But what if at some point, let's say Darius Garland's toe heals and he is back and ready to go, and Max Strus does not have any complications from his foot surgery, and he is back and ready to go in January, and there are no other injuries the entire time. The Cavs would be in a really good place, and let's talk about what that might look like. So I do think the starting five, when Max Strus gets back, because I am banking on DeAndre Hunter playing very well to start the season, coming out of a full training camp with the Cavs, having a full offseason, knowing his surroundings in Cleveland, I think he's going to have a big start to the year. So I'm going to go Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen as the starting five. I think that obviously DeAndre Hunter is really the only one with any wiggle room there. If the Cavs want to go Max Strus, I would understand it. I think DeAndre Hunter is the better answer. So that's your starting five. Those guys, of course, going to play somewhere between 25 and 33 minutes per night. Jared Allen probably closer to 25. Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland certainly going to be closer to 33. And I think DeAndre Hunter is somewhere in that realm as well. Off the bench, Max Strus becomes that first wing coming off the bench. I talked about maybe Jaylon Tyson taking that spot while Max is gone. I would not anticipate Jaylon Tyson to remain as the first wing off the bench when Max Strus gets back from his foot injury. Max is, I think, too accomplished of a player. I think he fits too well. I think he brings things, primarily movement shooting, that Jaylon just doesn't bring in his game. And I do think that the first few months of the season are a really big opportunity for Jaylon Tyson. But ultimately, even if he does play well, when Max is fully healthy, back up to speed, back into basketball shape, which will take a little bit, make no doubt about that, I think at that point, Max becomes the first wing off the bench. Then I do think that you can kind of put Sam Merrill and Lonzo Ball in like a tie for the first guard off the bench, just because their roles are so drastically different. It would not surprise me to see them enter the game at the same time. Like last year, we would see Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley leave early in the first quarter. They would always check out at the same time, unless one of them, of course, was at the free throw line. But they would always check out at the same time. Ty Jerome would typically come in a little bit later, but those guys would check out at the same time. I think that is kind of when you might see Lonzo Ball and Sam Merrill come in. Or you could maybe even see it a little bit later, because I do think there is something to having Lonzo Ball alongside Donovan Mitchell as opposed to Darius Garland. So maybe you play a little bit bigger, but you've got Darius Garland playing the one, you've got Sam Merrill playing the two, Lonzo Ball stays on the bench. So maybe really Sam is the first guard off the bench, but those two guards, no doubt about it, are going to be the first two guards coming off the bench. And I think that it's fair to expect them to play somewhere between 18 and 22 minutes. I think that's a very healthy place for those two bench players to be. Larry Nance Jr. remains the first big off the bench. I am curious. One of the things I'm very interested to see what happens when we start getting to actual basketball games about 5 weeks from now is, are the Cavs going to play three bigs every night? Because this is something they've obviously not always done, because they've not had a third big like Larry Nance Jr. And this is not shade at Robin Lopez or Tristan Thompson, but they've not had a legitimate third big that can most importantly play the 4 or the 5 since Kevin Love. So it's been a few years since that's been the case. Obviously, Kevin Love that year was I believe, runner-up for Sixth Man of the Year, lost to Tyler Hero, and he had a great year. Can Larry Nance Jr. replicate that? I'm not quite sure, but I do think for the first time under Kenny Atkinson, we will see a legitimate third big that plays every single night. I also do think this is in some ways a good thing for Dean Wade, because I think it means that Dean isn't necessarily having to play small ball 5 ever if Larry Nance is healthy. But also this might be something that cuts into his playing time, because there's somebody else that can legitimately play the 4. And then the position battle that I find the most interesting when the Cavs are going to be fully healthy is, who's the second wing off the bench? Is it Dean Wade? Is it Jaylon Tyson? What Dean does is great defensively. He's a very good shooter, but he's not aggressive enough offensively. And I think that is something that has at times frustrated the Cavs And I think at times that is something that can be used as a detriment. Like, he is not somebody that needs to be guarded quite as tightly as somebody the caliber of shooter that he is. The reason why teams don't have to defend him the way they have to defend somebody like a DeAndre Hunter from the outside is DeAndre Hunter is willing to let it fly. And if he's not going to let it fly, he can also attack off the dribble, where Dean can attack closeouts, but Dean doesn't have like some isolation game, and that's fine. But he is not as willing to just let the ball go. He's not as willing to just let it fly from the outside and get up shot attempt after shot attempt. He wants to always make the right play. And I think at times making the right play means you've got to take the open shot. But I do think at times guys view that as being selfish. And I actually think being a little too unselfish can be a bad thing. So can Jaylon Tyson capitalize on what will be an early season opportunity? Maybe. I don't know. That is one of the things that's going to be very interesting in October, November, and December, because if he can, I think he sort of becomes the 10th guy in the rotation and the second wing off the bench. And that would be a really, really big spot to be in. Now, maybe this means Dean Wade's not in the rotation. I don't know. We're going to have to see how things shake out. But that to me is the very interesting positional battle. And then you look at the rest of the roster. When the Cavs are fully healthy right now, I just don't see a role for Craig Porter Jr. And when the Cavs are fully healthy right now, I don't see a role for Tyrese Proctor. And that's okay because Tyrese is a rookie second-round pick. And teams that have championship level aspirations, the way that the Cavs do, or maybe expectations is a better way to term it. Guys that are picked in the 40s don't often make an impact as a rookie. So if Tyrese Proctor doesn't when the Cavs are fully healthy, I don't think that is that big of a deal. Now, the Cavs made a bit of an announcement on Tuesday. If you missed it, I'll tell you what it was. Plus, I'll talk about why I think it's a very, very good thing for the team straight ahead right here on Locked on Cavs. Thank you again for making Locked on Cavs your first listen today and every day. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for us and click subscribe. It is the best way to help grow Locked on Cavs. Let's boost that subscriber count as the basketball season grows closer. So it was announced by the Cleveland Cavaliers on Tuesday that training camp would be hitting the road again. The Cavs, for the second consecutive year, will be going to IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida for their training camp. They will be in Florida from September 30th, which is the day after Media Day. Media Day is set for September 29th. We'll be at Rocket Arena. That announcement was thrown into this press release about the Cavs holding training camp in Florida. But this is the second consecutive year. They will be there September 30th till October 5th. It's a six-day camp, second straight year they're doing that. And last year, obviously, the Cavs started out 15-0. How much of this was because they went to IMG Academy for training camp? I don't know. But I do think the Cavs really like doing this. And I think the biggest reason why they like doing this, and listen, the facility down there is outstanding. IMG Academy, if you're unfamiliar with it, I would urge you to Google what their campus looks like. It is essentially a college for high school kids. That's the best way I can put it. It is humongous. It is there. It's very much geared towards athletics. And obviously, like, the Cavs are not going to class down there, but their athletic facilities are outstanding. If you're a big football fan, there are a lot of guys in the NFL that have gone to IMG Academy. If you want right now, one thing I would venture you to do, go look up the high school football recruiting rankings in terms of who the best players are in the country. And you'll notice a lot of guys that are like top 150 players in the country, they go to IMG Academy. It is a place that is very much geared towards sports. They have an outstanding basketball facility. It is maybe not quite what an NBA practice facility is, but it's very, very impressive. That's not why the Cavs are going down there, though. The Cavs are going down there because this is a great opportunity for them to grow closer as a team. And I do believe the idea for this was sort of sparked when the Cavs went to Paris a few years ago. Think back to that trip. They played the Brooklyn Nets in Paris. They beat Brooklyn, and it was during what was a very, very impressive stretch for them. I believe they won like 7 consecutive games where they did not trail. Like, they led wire to wire. They were not losing at any point in like 7 straight games. And that was when they won, I think it was 17 out of 18 games. But they had one game in Paris over the course of the week, but they were in Paris for like 4 days. And it was at that moment where that team grew closer together and they were able to go on a run. And I think that last year, the Cavs wanted to do their best to replicate that by going away for a week at the start of the season, by going to IMG Academy, where the focus, yes, is going to be on basketball, but the focus is also going to be on the team. Because when you have training camp at home, and the Cavs have a great facility in Independence at Cleveland Clinic Courts, and we'll have an even better facility in the next couple of years when the one on the river opens up. But it's not about the facility. It's when you have training camp at home, what do you do when you're done with practice, when you're done with meetings, when you're done with your film study? If you're a player, you get in your car and you go home and you don't have to necessarily think about it. But when you're off site, the way the Cavs will be, this is an opportunity for this team to grow closer together, to form bonds, especially considering that there are new guys in the picture this year. So I think that this should be viewed as a really good thing. If you're a Cavs fan and you saw this news today, I think you should be really happy that the Cavs are going back to IMG Academy for training camp, because it is something that it didn't win them games. Like they didn't start 15-0 because they had this magic dust that they found at IMG Academy. But I don't think it hurt in building last year's team either. And I don't think going back is going to hurt whatsoever for the Cavaliers this year. That's it for today's show. We'll be back tomorrow. Couple of updates. Next week, Locked On's NBA Top 100 is coming out. We'll be talking about that. I've already seen it. I cannot spill the beans. I cannot tell you where Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley are, but I will talk about where they are early on next week. As I said, Friday's episode this week going to be a mailbag episode. So if you've got questions, drop them in the comments, tweet them at me, or email them to me. And you can find the email in the show description if you're watching or listening via whatever podcast platform you're on. So make sure you get your questions in. And thank you for making today's show your first listen of this Wednesday. Thank you for making it your first listen every single day. And like I said earlier, if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor. Click subscribe for me, hit the notification bell, and hit that thumbs up button as we get out of here, because that is the best way to help Locked On Cavs grow. And I will be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.